They say America doesn't have ancient cathedrals, but what if I told you there's one hiding in plain sight, so massive it took 83 years to finish, blessed by presidents, cursed by earthquakes, and filled with secrets carved into its very bones? This isn't some medieval wonder in France, it's right here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the Washington National Cathedral, the sixth largest cathedral in the world and arguably the most mysterious building in the United States. Gothic spires loom above political power, while gargoyles, stained glass, and underground crypts tell a story most tourists never hear. And today, we're diving deep, not just into its architecture, but into the energy this cathedral holds. I'm James, but online I go by Andrade. In this series, I travel, sometimes in person, sometimes through deep dives like this, to the world's most iconic and enigmatic landmarks. As I sketch them live, this one in watercolor, we uncover not just their architecture and history, but also their hidden symbols, strange legends, and even the conspiracies that make them truly unforgettable. Here's what we're uncovering in today's video: the bizarre backstory behind how this medieval-looking Gothic monument came to life in 20th century America, the architectural brilliance and symbolism woven into every spire, arch, and gargoyle, hidden relics, acoustical magic, and stained glass window containing actual moon rock, sacred geometry in the layout, and the weird energy it channels, paranormal tales, esoteric alignments, and a shadowy Masonic connection most visitors never hear about. So if you thought the National Cathedral was just another church with fancy windows, buckle up, because this place is a spiritual engine wrapped in stone. Let's start where it all began, not in Europe, but in the heart of post-colonial America. While Europe's great cathedrals often rose out of medieval mysticism, Washington's monumental house of worship was born from a very different impulse: national identity. It was 1792, just a few years into America's independence, when Major Pierre Charles L'Enfant, the French-born designer of D.C., laid out plans for a national church on a hill overlooking the fledgling capital. But like most grand visions in politics, it would take more than a century to actually begin. Fast forward to 1893, America was emerging as a world power, and there was a growing belief that the capital needed more than just government buildings. It needed spiritual architecture to anchor the soul of the nation. Enter Henry Yates Satterlee, the first Episcopal Bishop of Washington. He launched a full-on campaign to create a great church for national purposes, one that would rival Europe's finest but reflect American values and unity. It would be Gothic, yes, but made for modern democracy. After decades of debate, the foundation stone was finally laid in 1907, with none other than President Theodore Roosevelt in attendance. He called it a symbol of, quote, spiritual life at the heart of the nation, unquote. But building a Gothic cathedral, complete with flying buttresses and vaulted ceilings, using 20th century steel and stone, that was ambitious. Construction would continue, stop, and resume for over 83 years. Through 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, and a literal earthquake in 2011. What makes this story even weirder? This wasn't just a church, it was a national experiment, meant to be non-denominational in spirit, but Anglican in practice. The cathedral evolved into a spiritual crossroads where Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, and even atheists have all found moments of reflection. It became a place where American myth and sacred tradition quietly merged. But how do you translate all that history and vision into actual stone? That's where the design comes in, and the architects went all in. If you walked into Washington National Cathedral without context, you might assume it was flown over brick by brick from Europe, but it wasn't. Every inch was painstakingly crafted in Washington, D.C., by architects, sculptors, and artisans determined to resurrect the English Gothic style, with a distinctly American twist. The building's blueprint was inspired by 13th century English Gothic cathedrals like Canterbury and Lincoln. That means soaring pointed arches, ribbed vaults, and of course flying buttresses. These external stone arms, which look like spider legs holding up the walls, are what allow the cathedral to reach such great heights without collapsing under its own weight. And its massive 676 feet long, 30 stories tall, and made of Indiana limestone, quarried and shipped stone by stone to the nation's capital. The interior is a theater of light and stone. The nave rises over 100 feet above the floor with rows and pointed arches drawing your eyes heavenward. A deliberate design to inspire awe. Every column, molding, and archway was carved by hand, many by artisans trained in traditional stonemasonry schools. It's one of the last cathedrals in the world to be built using these ancient methods. No concrete core, no steel frame, just centuries-old technique. But here's where it gets fun, the details. Washington National Cathedral is filled with over 200 grotesques and gargoyles, each one unique, some traditional, others wildly modern. The most famous, a Darth Vader gargoyle, added in the 1980s after a national design competition for children. He's perched high up on the Northwest Tower, sneering over the Capitol with Sith-like menace. It's one of the many Easter eggs that make the cathedral playfully sacred. From the outside, it might seem like just another Gothic clone, but on closer look, Washington National Cathedral reveals itself as a living collage, a blend of medieval craftsmanship, American symbolism, and surprise sci-fi cameos. And the moment you step inside, the next surprise hits you, not with shape, but with color and sound. Step inside the Washington National Cathedral, and you're instantly swallowed by silence. The kind that feels holy, not empty. The first thing you notice isn't the ceiling or the carvings, it's the light. It pours in from 231 stained glass windows, each one filtering the sun into kaleidoscopic colors that spill across the limestone like liquid paint. Every step you take changes the hues around you. The windows aren't just beautiful, they're narrative devices, telling stories in light. The most famous of all, the space window. Installed in 1974, commemorating the Apollo 11 mission, it doesn't just depict space, it contains it. A literal lunar rock, brought back by Neil Armstrong, is embedded in the center, making this one of the only sacred spaces on Earth to house an object from beyond Earth. As your eyes adjust, the architecture begins to whisper. The nave stretches nearly the length of 2 football fields, and the pointed arches guide your gaze skyward with purpose. There's no harsh lighting, everything is lit naturally or by discrete fixtures. This intentional soft glow fosters contemplation and stillness even during public services. And when the light fades, the cathedral changes, transitioning from sunlit clarity to mysterious shadow, like a living entity that breathes with daylight. And then there's the sound, or sometimes the lack of it. The acoustics are so refined that even a whisper from the pulpit can carry through the nave. No mic needed, but when the sound is used, it transforms the space. The cathedral houses a massive 10,647 pipe organ, and when it plays, the walls vibrate with harmonic resonance. Choir performances here are almost supernatural in tone. The architecture acts as both stage and instrument. But it's not just about grandeur. Look closer and you'll find tiny chapels tucked into corners, quiet spaces for personal prayer, each one with its own aesthetic and emotional frequency. It's a cathedral that scales from the cosmic to the intimate, a spiritual echo chamber that amplifies whatever you bring into it, from grief to awe. At first glance, Washington National Cathedral looks like a classic Gothic revival church, echoing the designs of European cathedrals from centuries past. But look a little closer, and this sacred space becomes a layered library of visual symbolism, hidden in plain sight. Every sculpture, window, and carving has a story, and often it's not the one you'd expect. Let's start with the relics and saints. While most cathedrals boast relics from the apostles or early Christian martyrs, the National Cathedral takes a broader approach. One chapel contains fragments of Martin Luther King Jr.'s pulpit, a modern relic of civil rights and nonviolent resistance. Another features a piece of steel from the World Trade Center, solemnly embedded in the memory of 9/11. These aren't just spiritual relics, they're cultural relics, turning the cathedral into a living shrine of American history. The symbolism stretches to the statuary too. Yes, you'll find the traditional figures of Mary, Jesus, saints, and angels, but standing among them are figures like George Washington in prayer, Abraham Lincoln, and even Mother Teresa. These aren't just patriotic decorations, they're intentional, symbolizing a fusion of faith, moral leadership, and civic responsibility. The cathedral positions itself as a spiritual home, not just for Christians, but for the moral conscience of the nation. And then there are the grotesques and gargoyles, which steal the show. Hidden high in the upper reaches of the exterior are creatures meant to ward off evil spirits. Except one of them isn't ancient at all. One of the most famous is the Darth Vader grotesque, sculpted in the 1980s as part of a children's design contest. Its presence is both hilarious and strangely fitting. A pop culture icon of power and redemption hidden among medieval-style creatures. It's a wink from the builders saying, yes, we see you, and we have a sense of humor. Symbolism also pulses through the cathedral's layout and chapels. Each chapel is themed not just by religious tradition, but by human experience, prayer, healing, resurrection, and reconciliation. The children's chapel features carvings sized to be seen from a child's height. The Good Shepherd Chapel highlights healing and protection, while the War Memorial Chapel juxtaposes grief and hope. The cathedral isn't just built for praise, it's built for processing life. Every part of the space has been infused with meaning, some overt, some hidden. Together, they create a cathedral that is less about dogma and more about dialogue between past and present, faith and action, personal reflection, and public memory. From the outside, Washington National Cathedral looks like an ancient European structure, as if it were airlifted from France and dropped into D.C. But its geometry tells a far more deliberate story, one of sacred math, hidden proportions, and architectural wizardry engineered to withstand centuries, and even earthquakes. Start with the layout. The cathedral follows the cruciform floor plan, a classic Latin cross symbolizing the body of Christ, used in most medieval Gothic cathedrals. But this cross is also perfectly aligned with astronomical coordinates. Its long nave oriented east to west. This isn't just about tradition, it's cosmic choreography. At dawn, light pierces through the Resurrection Chapel, and by sunset it ignites the Great West Rose Window. The path of the sun becomes part of the cathedral's ritual drama. The genius doesn't stop there. Every dimension in the building adheres to harmonic ratios. Based on classical principles of proportion, from Vitruvius to Palladio, the nave's height and length relate with a 2-to-1 ratio, creating a rhythm that subconsciously calms the mind and uplifts the spirit. Architects used sacred geometry, echoing Fibonacci spirals and golden rectangles, to embed a natural sense of balance and divinity into the very bones of the structure. And then there's the vaulting system, one of the most complex in the Western Hemisphere. Inspired by the 14th century English Gothic, especially the cathedrals at York and Canterbury, the builders employed ribbed vaults, pointed arches, and flying buttresses, not just for aesthetics, but to channel weight and energy through the structure like a living organism. The flying buttresses outside the nave transfer lateral forces outward and downward, allowing the walls to soar impossibly high while housing massive stained glass windows. This is structural poetry in stone. Now, here's the most part people miss: the seismic reinforcements. After the 2011 Virginia earthquake, engineers assessed the damage and realized that, miraculously, the cathedral held up better than most modern buildings. Why? The redundancy in the Gothic design, the flexibility of the ribbed vaults, and the built-in tolerance of medieval joinery. Modern steel reinforcements would add later, but the original design already had baked-in resilience, proving that ancient geometry is future-proof genius. And if you're wondering whether all this was intentional, here's your answer. The architects were students of Freemasonic traditions, Gothic revivalists obsessed with ancient wisdom, and early 20th century idealists who believed architecture could elevate the national soul. They weren't just designing a church, they were encoding a temple of proportion and power, using geometry to align heaven and earth. Washington National Cathedral is a place of prayer, sure, but also a place of riddles. Beneath its choir anthems and stained glass glow lies of deeper current, one where mysticism, symbolism, and even science fiction pulse quietly through its stones. This is not just a church, it's an occult playground, hiding messages in plain sight. Let's start with the most famous oddity, Darth Vader. Yes, that Darth Vader. In the 1980s, during the children's competition To design grotesques for the cathedral's north facade, one winning entry was a sculpted Darth Vader head. Today, the Sith Lord silently glares down from the upper spires. It might seem like a joke, but symbolically, Vader represents a fall from grace, a corrupted knight, and a warning of power misused. And guess what? He's positioned on the dark side of the cathedral. Coincidence? Doubt it. Now, zoom out and look at the labyrinth. It's embedded in the nave's floor, inspired by the one at Chartres Cathedral, a spiritual map for inner transformation. Walk it slowly, and you're not just pacing through a pattern, you're reenacting a pilgrimage. These labyrinths were used in mythical traditions to induce altered states of consciousness, a kind of walking meditation believed to realign the psyche and connect with divine truth. The Freemasonic fingerprints are everywhere. Many of the original builders and architects were connected to Freemasonry, a society steeped in sacred geometry, esoteric codes, and initiation rituals. The entire cathedral can be read as a temple of enlightenment, where the upward thrust of the Gothic vaults mirror the aspirant's journey from the base materialism to spiritual illumination. The rose windows, alchemical mandalas, the crypt levels, earthly descent and resurrection. Things get weirder underground. Visitors have reported feeling sudden chills, dizziness, and even spotting shadowy figures near the Bethlehem Chapel, the oldest part of the cathedral. One local legend claims that a 13th century manuscript donated to the cathedral's archives contains a ritual for invoking angels through harmonic chant, and that an unauthorized attempt to use it during a midnight concert caused unexplained light flares in the nave. And let's not forget the space window. In 1974, the cathedral installed a stained glass panel called the Scientists and Technicians Window, containing a real moon rock from Apollo 11, embedded in a swirl of cosmic glass. Officially, it honors science. Unofficially, it's a portal, a symbolic keyhole between heaven and space, Earth and cosmos. Many believe it completes the alchemical triangle: body, crypt, soul, nave, and spirit, space window. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Beneath the polished sermons and patriotic hymns, Washington National Cathedral hides a library of secrets. Ghosts, sigils, cosmic relics, Freemasonic symbols, all woven into its Gothic bones. So what does it all mean? Washington National Cathedral isn't just a church. It's a paradox, a medieval dream built in modern times, a place where presidents pray beneath gargoyles, where moon rocks glow inside stained glass, and where Freemason geometry still whispers through the arches. It's a building that carries not just America's faith, but its conflicts, contradictions, and ambitions. In its soaring ceilings, we see our hunger for transcendence. In its grotesques, we see our shadows. And in that tiny sliver of lunar rock, we glimpse a future where science and spirit blur. This cathedral isn't just a monument, it's a mirror reflecting who we are as a nation and what we choose to worship. If you've ever walked beneath these towers, you know the feeling: awe, confusion, reverence, maybe even unease. And if you haven't, maybe this journey through stone and story has shown you why this cathedral matters, not just to Washington, but to the human story itself. Before you go, here's your part. What's the strangest or most surprising detail you discovered in this episode? Please drop it in the comments. I do read every one. And also, what cathedral, temple, or ruin do you want to see me sketch and explore next? If this journey spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive. If you would like to support this channel and my work, you can find prints, puzzles, and art from the series on my Etsy. You can see behind-the-scenes sketches on Instagram and short-form art and lives on TikTok. That closes out our deep dive into Washington National Monument, a cathedral born of Gothic visions but forever haunted by America's own myths. I'll see you in the next one.